Today we give you the inside scoop on the wild police chase through the north side, plus breaking news regarding a violation of child labor laws in San Angelo. I'm Matt Trammell, and welcome to Live. Today's news segment is brought to you by Myers Drug and Boutique. At Myers, you can find something for everyone. From fashionable clothes and accessories at their boutique to comfortable and affordable lift chairs at their pharmacy. If you need it, they probably got it. So go see them today in the heart of downtown San Angelo or visit it on the web at myersdrug.com. A high-speed chase through San Angelo this afternoon ended abruptly with a crash and two drivers injured and a 42-year-old man in custody. The chase began in downtown San Angelo and ended up taking San Angelo police, Tom Green County Sheriff deputies, and constables through the north side of Tom Green County. The man fled from officers going out Armstrong Street like he was heading to Robert Lee when he turned down Bristow Road. After driving around on Runyon and Red Creek roads, the suspect hit a sheriff's deputy vehicle and began driving in circles between Bryant Boulevard and Armstrong Street. Eventually, the suspect came down the frontage road of the loop and crashed into a red GMC Terrain at the intersection of Van Buren and Dallas Street. The suspect began fleeing on foot down the ramp onto Houston Hart, where police took him into custody in the median. Some commenters on San Angelo Live saw the action as it was happening. Let's take a look at some of that video. As you can see here, this is where the man ran down there. Look. There he is, ran down the hill. He was later captured by police in that median. Also, our reporter James Bellini saw the chase. This is out on Armstrong coming in after he turned around 208. The woman in the GMC Terrain and the suspect were taken to the hospital. San Angelo PIO Richard Espinosa was on scene and gave what details he could about the chase. Let's watch.
Officers attempted a traffic stop on this white and color Dodge Dually here in town. The vehicle and the suspect inside the vehicle actively evaded the detention, which led to a very initial slow-speed pursuit throughout town. Officers continued to pursue the vehicle in town and ultimately ended up out in the county near Armstrong. The suspect vehicle ended up coming back into town. We attempted to use stop sticks multiple times at different intersections to prevent the vehicle from continuing to flee. The vehicle was able to avoid our stop sticks at multiple times. We continued to pursue the vehicle in town with the assistance of the Sheriff's Office as well as the Tom Green County Constable's Office. Ultimately, the white and colored dually collided with a red and colored GMC Terrain at the intersection of Van Buren and Dallas. The suspect, which is can only be identified right now as a 42-year-old Caucasian male, then fled the accident on foot, was ultimately taken into custody by officers. There was a female vehicle in a white and colored dually as well too. She had minor injuries and was cleared on scene by medics. The driver of the red and colored GMC Terrain had some injuries associated with the accident as well too, and was transported to Shannon Medical Center via ambulance for said injuries. At this point in time, it is an active investigation. Charges are pending. That's all the information I have at this time.
That's not the only thing PD has been up to either. Late last night, a patrol officer spotted an orange Chevy Silverado commit a traffic violation. It was learned during the stop that two men in the vehicle were wanted. The first man, 57-year-old Jose Nira, was found to have a number of city warrants. But the driver, however, 65-year-old Juan Carlos Lopez, had a warrant from Harris County for attempted murder. Little details have been released at this time about the murder, but our reporters have reached out to both the Harris County Attorney and the Harris County District Clerk's office. A San Angelo woman was in court today facing a murder charge. Sydney Kennan took a plea deal for a murder that occurred last year. Back in March of 2021, Keenan shot and killed Roy Perez after a physical confrontation. Keenan said Perez produced a knife and she shot him as he was advancing towards her. Keenan then left the scene, emptied the firearm, and disposed of the ammunition. Several witnesses told investigators that the man never had a knife and heard Keenan said she was going to shoot him if he did not stop. In the deal, the obstruction and tampering charges were dropped, and for the murder charge, Keenan will serve 15 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And finally, what you've all been waiting for. A restaurant business in the Sunset Mall violated a Fair Labor Standard Act by instructing workers to clock out and continue working. Charley's Philly Steaks in Sunset Mall has violated the child labor standards by allowing 5 of their minors to work more than the number of hours in past specific time federal law allows. Investigator also found out that the employer in violation of child labor prohibited occupations when they regularly allowed one minor to use a deep fryer. In information released on Wednesday by the Department of Labor, back wages were recovered from Charley's Philly Steak in the total amount of $10,154. After the break, we change it up a little bit. A Democrat is in studio to go one-on-one with Joe Hyde. Democrat John Lehrer is running against Republican Tony Gonzalez in November for Congress in District 23. Stay tuned for the spirited debate. We'll be right back after this quick message from Kano's Diamonds.
When it comes to unique pieces you can't find anywhere else, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is your one-stop shop. With over 24 years in the diamond and coin industry, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is West Texas's choice for diamonds, jewelry, coins, silver, and gold. Owner Bill Kano stands by his work and offers free consultations, including estate jewelry. Don't just trust anyone with your valuables. Come see the staff at Kano's at 1016 West Beauregard in St. Angelo.
Congressional District 23 is. It's the congressional district just below August Pfluger's CD 11, and it spans from the outskirts of the urban areas of San Antonio through Eagle Pass, Del Rio, Alpine, all the way to the urban areas on the eastern side of El Paso. And CD 23 has the honor of being the longest contingent border between the U.S. and Mexico. So the border issues are big and hot in that area. Also, another big issue that happened in CD 23 recently was the tragic massacre in the Uvalde school. Uvalde is part of CD 23. So, Mr. Lehrer, John Lehrer, he is going to challenge Tony Gonzalez. He won the Democrat primary back in March, and we're honored to have him on. We're going to talk about some issues. So, Mr. Lehrer, say hi to San Angelo, Texas, and beyond.
Absolutely. Great to be here with all of you. Thank you for taking time, and hello, San Angelo, our neighbors to the north, as we say down here in Texas 23.
Well, Mr. Lehrer, I'm going to get right into the issues. First of all, I guess I won't get right into them, but before we get right to the issues, let's talk about who you are. Give us a little background of where you're from, where your experience, life experience, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, happy to do so. My story starts in San Antonio, Texas. I was born and raised in southeast Bexar County, right by the old Brooks Air Force Base, if anybody is familiar with that, now Brooks City Base. But my story really begins in my senior year of high school. I raised my hand to join the United States Marine Corps. That not only planted the seed of service, but it sparked an 11-and-a-half-year career, including 2 combat tours to Iraq. The Marines gave me a very kind of governmental job as an intelligence analyst, so I used my GI Bill here in San Antonio area to further that profession. I got a degree in political science from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and ultimately made my way up to Carnegie Mellon University for my master's in public policy. After that, went to the front lines of public policy in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. I worked at 3 agencies, including AmeriCorps, where I worked on veterans and military families transition back to civilian life. I worked at the U.S. Small Business Administration, where I trained veterans to become small business owners and entrepreneurs. Then ultimately a commission on service that was created by Senator John McCain in 2017. And it was all based upon how we can create an ethos of service within America's youth to want to serve in the military or in government or in their community in nonprofits. So that explains a lot of how I got here. Why I'm running for this race in a lot of ways is because Texas 23 is one of the most unique places of American territory that we have. I mean, it's one of the biggest, like you said. If it was a state, it would be the 25th biggest state. We have exactly 40% of our nation's total border with Mexico here in our district. I say we have enough to fuel, feed, and fly most of America right here in Texas 23. And the good people of Texas 23 want a representative that recognizes all of that and is able to grow those opportunities here in the district. So that's why I'm in this race.
Well, Mr. Lehrer, all that stuff you've done, how old are you?
Well, you can't tell because you'll never see my gray hairs, but I'm 41 years old. So quite possibly the last time I would be considered a young candidate. So I had to take advantage of that.
That's right. 41 is young. Just trust me on that one. Well, anyway, CD23 is an interesting place. I used to live in Del Rio, so I've had 10 years living in Del Rio, so I understand a lot of the issues. One of the things I just wanted to bring up, and I know these are politically contentious things to talk about, but I was wondering if we could just talk about it in a real manner. My first job as a journalist was to cover voter fraud. And I covered a story in Del Rio, Texas. We had 3 or 4 ladies who would organize ballot harvesting operations. Now, this is back in 2002, and everyone laughed at the story I did. I mean, I had to do an open records request, got copies of all the ballots. We went through all the ballots. We categorized which ones were aided by those ladies and which ones weren't. And it was majority those ladies had helped harvest all these ballots. And what the impact was, a school board race they had just one candidate in it, but a write-in candidate who was aided by the ballot harvesting actually won the race. And so voter fraud and things like that have always been kind of dear to me. And of course, then we have the November 3rd election, and now we have the January 6th inquiry at the House right now. I just want to ask you, do you, as a Democrat, do you have any problems with some of the laws that they've passed in Texas for voter integrity? For example, not allowing 24-hour voting, basically making it harder for people to take advantage of the system and perhaps bring out an election that should have been one way but would go the other because people are taking advantage of loopholes in the law.
Yeah, I think democracy is a cornerstone of, voting is the cornerstone of American democracy. So all Americans should have equal and unfettered access to the ballot box. And I do think that in some cases, some of the laws passed by the Texas state legislature this past session do overreach a bit. I think in a lot of ways they aim to kind of suppress or kind of suppress voting in some of our larger counties like San Antonio, like Dallas, like Houston, by making them adapt to some of the more rural counties' requirements. So, I think we saw a huge impact of that, and I think especially in my district, we are fighting overwhelming voter empathy. So it's even hard to even get that person to fill out that vote by mail ballot, much less go stand in line for a couple of hours, on election day. So I think we should be doing everything we can to make it a bit easier by extending, the hours and the days for early voting, especially for folks that want to go maybe later at maybe 10 o'clock in the evening when they are wide awake and the lines are a little bit lower. Do I think it has an impact? Absolutely. We saw that in the primary where 22,000 of our fellow Texans' votes were not counted, or their vote by mail requests were denied. Because of, maybe some tiny little fonts on the back of the envelope that said they have to use their driver's license versus their social security number. So it got real confusing. But I do believe that Americans do deserve secure, transparent, and, unsurplantable elections. We need to have faith and build faith in our systems. I deployed to Iraq to make sure that Iraqis in 2005 voted free of coercion, voted in a transparent way, were not denied access by, outside forces. And I never thought that I would have to come back home and kind of fight for those same things here in Texas. which does have, again, one of the most one of the most oppressive laws, I think, when it comes to voting. So I absolutely agree with voter integrity, with voting security, with voting transparency. Every American should want that. But when it comes at the cost of now denying and making it an additional burden and causing additional doubt on voting itself, then I think that's where it goes too far for me.
Well, John, I'm going to expand that question because, I mean, this is my experience in CD23. I became the election fraud expert. But another early story I did was about Laughlin Air Force Base had approximately 800 absentee ballots that were cast in Val Verde County, which is right there in the middle of CD23. And most of them were voting for a Republican. And this happened in the mid-90s. What happened was, for the first time in 114 years, a Republican was elected sheriff of Val Verde County because of those 800 votes. And the Democrat Party actually went and sued Val Verde County and said that those votes should not be allowed because they diluted the Hispanic vote. What do you think about efforts to stop or curtail absentee military voting?
Yeah, I think that is, I mean, being a military veteran myself and understanding that most veterans or most active duty service members choose to do absentee ballots from from where they enlisted into the military from. So the fact that a majority, and in this case, the example that you're pointing out seems like a large majority, decided to keep their vote right there where they were actually stationed versus where they enlisted out of the military from. I think it absolutely does cause some concern. I mean, those serving on military bases, often don't live outside don't live outside of base. So they're might not be as in tuned to the local and the state politics, or of where they're actually stationed at versus where they live back home. So I mean, I think the fact that they sued them, I think maybe. Not being a legal expert, I do think that just on kind of first blush, I would say, yeah, they might have cause to kind of raise some concern about that. Again, it is highly abnormal for military to take on an absentee ballot and not vote back home at their local election versus where they're stationed at in that local community where they might not be as in tune with.
Well, one of the things that's happened in the military voting world is, and I'm a veteran too, and I was actually the voting officer at Laughlin Air Force Base when all this happened. But what happens is,
that's a tough job to get them to kind of be engaged in a way.
Yeah, heck yeah, we got 800 votes out. But what happens is most of those voters, when they get stationed in Texas, they reset their domicile to Texas because Texas has no state income tax. So that's a problem with all of our Texas bases. When you talk about how people who don't even live in the community are impacting the community through their votes, and that there's yin and yang on that, go back and forth. But at the same time, my other thought on this, if we're going to have 24-hour voting, we're going to have drive-through voting, we're going to have all these crazy ways to vote, why not just let the military vote wherever the military decides where their domicile is?
Yeah, I think the question that I would have for that is military included in the local census while they're temporarily stationed on that base in there? If the military population is included as part of that jurisdiction's or that area's census count, well then maybe they should be incorporated into that. Now, if they're not included as part of that census, through the census, then maybe they're unaccounted for on that aspect. But I think it's a good conversation to have. I think that military should be allowed to either vote in their residence of record or where they're stationed at. If they do claim that domicile, I would have no issues with that.
All right. Well, let's go on to the next one. Let's talk some public affair, or the most recent news. Obviously, the biggest news, other than what happened in your district, we'll get to that, but is Roe versus Wade. And, CD23 is predominantly, I would think, Catholic, very religious, particularly with there's a lot of Hispanic families that are still, they're together. You have a very strong Catholic diocese down there. And obviously, they're going to be pro-life. And how does a Democrat go into an environment like that And what is your message as far as the pro-life in Roe versus Wade? Would you be passing laws or signing on to legislation in Washington that would guarantee the right to abortion in CD 23, or would you just leave it alone, or are you pro-life?
Yeah, great question. I think I was a member of one of those families that is heavily Catholic. Have been listening to in a lot of ways, the Catholic Church saying that their stances against abortion in a lot of ways. And at one point in my life, I may have felt that way. But I think now, I am I'm a father of a 16-year-old daughter. I am the uncle of 4 little ladies coming to age. Our whole next generation is nothing but there's 5 little ladies coming up into this world. So in that aspect, I got to think as a father, I would never want my daughter or any of my nieces to have an abortion. Quite frankly, I think it's probably one of the hardest decisions that a woman probably ever has to make, and not including a woman, but also with her doctor and with her partner, if that situation is even available to have a conversation with. So I do support a woman's right to choose. To me, it's not about the abortion itself. To me, in a lot of ways, it's about protecting that right as a woman to determine when she wants to become a mother, how and when, at what point in her life. Pregnancies happen for a range of issues, and so do abortions, quite frankly. Some of them are medically induced. Some of them is where the contraception has failed that they had been depending on. Some of them is out of rape and incest, and some of them are just out of, everyday kind of adult, sexual activity. So I think there's a lot of ways, but I think that I would want my daughter and my nieces to have every option off the table to them. If you think about it and you zoom out and kind of understand what this does to women's healthcare in general. I was in Del Rio the other day, and when the news broke, actually the Dobbs decision broke, and I looked up women's health clinics, or I was trying to look them up on Google Maps. There wasn't a women's health clinic or a women's pregnancy clinic for 150 miles away from Del Rio. There was not one even close. I mean, that's kind of scary to have our mothers and our expected mothers to be with doctors maybe now terrified to treat them and offer that, just basic maternity services, much less reproductive services. I mean, this is America. I think this is an area where we should be able to lead on, and not, like I said, not creating abortion mills necessarily, but making them safer, talking through a woman through her options, of course, when she has to make these decisions. But at the end of the day, I think that decision to become a mother and what she carries and injects and puts into her body and ultimately what comes out of her body, it should be her decision. And I'm still, like I said, I'm speaking that way out of a proud, a devout Catholic, an axe brother, a father, that has studied the issues. And I basically, I have sympathy towards these unborn children. I really do, and I do believe that, that they were, everything in a lot of ways it was created, by God to have some purpose in life. And I do feel uneasy about terminating a pregnancy, but I do think that a woman's rights kind of trumps that for me.
Well, we're kind of going like we talked about the voter rights thing, where we would allow, a Democrat worldview would be to allow everyone to vote, except in certain situations. And abortion is kind of the same thing. They want to have, basically everyone has to be able to have access to an abortion. But I think the problem in South Texas, from what I understand about the people there, is they're most of them are very religious or have some type of ties to the Christian worldview and the biblical worldview, where it says don't kill. I mean, that's part of the 10 Commandments, and I think a lot of people feel that if we have unrestricted access to every kind of abortion or every abortion for any kind of reason, that somehow we're no longer blessed as a nation or as a community or, that kind of thing, and bad things will happen to us. And I think there's a lot of superstition on that, or not, I wouldn't even call it religious superstition. The religious people know that, there's a reaction, opposite reaction to every kind of decision you make. And if we're going to defend life with our law enforcement and our criminal justice system on the day they're born, why are we not defending, when God knew them in their womb? So how do you reconcile with I guess the Christian worldview aspect of the abortion?
Yeah, I completely sympathize with it. Again, I understand where they're coming from. But and people live their religions through different ways. There's no standard of religion in this country, but there is a standard of law and essentially rights, that we should have. So again, I think as much as we don't want to infringe on an American's right to own and bear a firearm, or we don't want to ever mandate that anybody get a vaccine. I think that's pretty un-American as well, to mandate that every single person, regardless of what their medical or health conditions are, or what their conversations with their doctors are, should get a vaccine. I think in other ways they should have a choice too, whether they decide to get that vaccine, just like women, and again, should have a choice as to what kind of goes in and out of their body. I mean, I listened to that. I sat in the pews as well, and I had to come to terms with it internally myself. And I ultimately sided on the side of my daughter and my nieces and all the other young women that are coming in America, that are coming to be. And again, I hope and I do pray that a woman doesn't have to ever find herself in a situation where she's having to terminate a pregnancy. I think and I would hope that it would be a hard decision, and I would hope that would be the last resort. But if she does ultimately decide to make that, then let's make that as safe as as possible for her, and so that for her health as well going forward. So I guess I know that in many Hispanics, especially in my community, they agree with Democratic policy platform. 95%, they are Democrats, but that one issue of abortion puts them over the edge. They are those one issues. And I know that it's something that I'm going to have honest conversations about. But I think what I can do is just relate to them, how I struggled to deal with it, and ultimately how I came to the decision that I do want to support, my daughter and the ladies that are coming to be, that might have to one day, unfortunately, make that decision.
Well, we can move on from Roe versus Wade. That's always a tough one for two guys to talk about. But let's turn it now to border security. Yesterday, July 5th, you had the Kinney County Sheriff put out a press release about, I didn't read the whole thing, I'm not totally in it, but he basically said that he's transporting illegals back to the border and putting them across the river himself. Because no one's doing anything to help them down there. I talked to a lot of friends and business associates in Del Rio, Eagle Pass, that area. They're just sick of it. They're sick of the border crisis. They're sick of they're at breaking points, and I think it's across ideological bounds now because it's gotten so bad. What are you going to bring to Congress if you're elected to solve this border crisis, in light of you're running for office under the banner of the Democratic Party, which is Joe Biden, who is getting blamed for everything for his open borders policies?
Yeah, no, I agree. What we have now is not a nation, not a border system, not an immigration system, not an asylum system that is befitting a nation of immigrants that we are. It is a mess down there, and I will call it a crisis because I've been down there and I've talked to the people down there, and they tell me it's a crisis. They live it every single day. And these are some very, yellow dog Democrats. These are Christ-loving, Catholics and great Christians, kind people, honest workers. But when you mention migrants, they kind of tense up and they say, yes, we are concerned. We get groups walking through our neighborhoods. They're starting to take over abandoned houses. I don't feel safe. A gentleman says he has to leave to work, and now he's concerned about leaving his wife and his kid, there alone. So it is certainly a crisis, and I do call on President Joe Biden to do more about it. He made a lot of campaign promises that said that he would address this issue. Migrants are straining these communities. They're straining law enforcement. They're straining the public services that these counties can provide to their own citizens, and the citizens, again, they're feeling that a lot more attention and resources are being given to the migrants. Then it's easier for the migrants to get these benefits than sometimes those in the community that really need them. So in a lot of ways, I agree with them. I want there to be solutions here. I think our borders should be places where American tourists come to have an exchange of culture. They can go into Mexico and shop. People from Mexico can come over the border. They can see the culture there, right there at the border. It should be tourist attractions. So a couple of things. Our asylum laws are outdated. They never, when they were written, they never took into account 1,000+ people caravans. So one, that we have to have members have the courage to step up in a bipartisan manner and address them. I like in-country processing centers. I think it worked for us in Haiti back in the day, and I think that we can get this asylum process started in their country, and then they slowly work their way up depending on which phase of the process that they're in, so that when they do get to America, they're ready for their hearings right there that day, and they're not let loose, and they're not kind of shipped all across the country in hopes that they make it back for that hearing. I do believe in we have to fix our regular immigration system. I know I have talked to folks that said my cousin has been waiting for 12 years for their statement back from the Department of the Secretary of State about their green card. Of course, when you shut down all legal options, folks will choose illegal options. I also want to mention the work visa program. I've talked to ranchers and farmers, and there's a ton of them in this district, and they're saying, why are we turning them back? I will house them, I will feed them, we can pay them, we can tax them, but they should be part of our economic recovery. Immigrants are a drag on our nation right now because our laws and our polarization are making them a drag. And I'll tell you, and I know this is it's hard, but I think that Republicans benefit off there being a mess on the border. I think if it were to be fixed, then they would not have anything to point and say, look, there's an invasion down there. And listen, Matt, I've been deployed to Iraq. I was part of an invasion. I was a part of an invasion. I had 120 rounds of ammo on me. I had tanks behind me. I had attack helicopters in the air and jets ready to drop bombs. What we have down there is not an invasion. It is humans seeking humanitarian assistance, and it is a humanitarian crisis. I will give you that. And we absolutely, again, from the human side of me, I empathize for them. I can never imagine what would it convince a person to make this long, perilous journey, to subject themselves to rape, to manipulation, to robbing, to everything else, in order just to get to America, when we have so many issues in America right now, but they still want to get here for that one opportunity. And, and as long as it remains lucrative to some of the coyotes and some of the people that are saying, give me those $2,000. Joe Biden says, if you go now, you can get in. I can take you there. Trust me. As long as it remains lucrative and the coyote system is not broken up, these caravans are going to keep coming. So it's definitely like I said, if this was easy, it would have been solved many years ago. I think what I can bring to it is one, bipartisan nature to want to get to the front of it. I think I can start off with my veterans on both sides of the aisle, and let's find American solutions. One of my ideas is that we form a national border commission. We take the policy ideas out of the politicians' hands and form a task force of demographers, of academics, of local leaders, of religious communities, of people, along the border on both sides, include Mexico in that as well. And we come up with American ideas to fix this, not left or right ideas, but American solutions that is befitting a nation of immigrants.
Well, John, that's a good answer, and I have a lot of follow-ups to it. And I want you to stay on. But right now, because of our show length, I'm going to have to send this back to Matt Trammell in a second. But for the people watching this show, we're going to have an extended story, an extended interview on San Angelo Live right after the news is out. So, Matt, back to you. Okay.
All right, so we are back. That was Joe Hyde with John Lehrer. He is running for Texas 23's congressional seat against Tony Gonzalez. What a great interview. So before we go, just want to remind you, like us on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram. And, of course, you can subscribe to us on YouTube to get alerted every time that we go live for this daily show. If you are looking for what restaurant, you must have missed it earlier. You can find that on sanangelolive.com, so go check it out. Until then, I'm Matt Trammell, and we will see you tomorrow.